All right, everybody, so we are taking notes in Unit 2 of our notebook, so go ahead and flip to your table of contents page. We are ready for page 18. And on page 18, we are going to have a note set called Creating and Solving Equations. So creating and solving equations. So if you look, last time we did solving equations, we talked about inverse operations and how you actually solve them. So today we're going to create them first and then solve them. So these are typically word problems whenever you have to create. So we need to flip to page 18. That should be on the left because it's an even number. So here's my page 18. Your note set is like this. You will just need to fold it in half and tape it down. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. Now that we have that taped in, we can actually start doing some problems. So, like I said earlier, when we create equations, they typically come from a word problem, or maybe it's just a couple of sentences, but it gives you a situation and asks you to create the equation, and then you have to use it to answer whatever question that they're asking. So, in this foldable, I have 5 examples that I'm going to help you through. So, for the first one, I'm just going to read it, and I want you to remember in math class, when we deal with word problems, when you read word problems, not every single word is important. We need to focus on the numbers, any equations that we're given, and what the question is actually asking us. Those are the 3 key things that we need to focus on. So this first one, let me read it for you. The profit P an ice cream store makes in one day when producing X gallons of ice cream is given by the equation, and then here's our equation. For what value of X is the store's profit equal to 0? So for me, when I read this, I'm like, okay, a store, they're making ice cream and they're trying to sell some ice cream. The important thing, and I'm going to highlight it, is the equation. We definitely need the equation. And then the other thing that I think is important, it says for what value of X is the store's profit equal to 0? So we need profit equal to 0. This is a phrase that is used oftentimes referring to break even. So what that means is when a store creates or starts their business, they don't automatically start making money. They have to earn back what they originally put in. And so when they do that, it's called break even. So we want to know for what value of X, remember X is gallons of ice cream, we want to know how many gallons of ice cream the store has to sell in order to break even. Because once they break even, they actually start making a profit. So break even is when our money value is equal to 0. So profit is our P value. They said that up here. So we're just going to take that 0 and substitute it in for P. So we have 0 is equal to 60x minus 480. So here's the equation. All we did was substitute in the profit is equal to 0. And now we would just solve this like normal. So I'm going to walk you through that. Remember, when you're solving equations, the whole goal is to get that x by itself, or the variable. Sometimes they don't use x. So we need to look at this minus 480 back here. We would need to get rid of that first. And using inverse operations, we're going to add 480 to both sides. Because remember, the inverse is opposite. So since this is a minus sign right here, I'll have to do the opposite of it. These are going to go away. And I'm left with 480 on the left-hand side. Bring down my equal sign, and I've got 60x on the right. Well, I'm not quite done yet because that x is not completely by itself. So now I need to divide both sides by 60. Just like that. Well, these 60s are going to go away. And I'm left with, I'm going to flip it around because x, I want to be on this left-hand side. X is equal to, and then 480 divided by 60 is 8. So this is the solution to our equation, x equals 8. But oftentimes when we're dealing with word problems, we need to actually know in context of the situation what this solution actually means. So remember, X represented gallons of ice cream, and then our question was for what value of X is the store's profit equal to 0. So that means when this store sells 8 gallons of ice cream or makes 8 gallons of ice cream, they will break even. So since we're dealing with a word problem, we're going to come up with a sentence. Doesn't have to be a super long sentence explaining what this solution actually means. So we're going to say what we just went over. They need to produce 8 gallons of ice cream to break even. And that's it. So I'll give you a little bit of time to write that down. And then we'll move on to example 2. Okay, so now let's take a look at example number 2. Close my little book here. So example number 2. So I'm going to read it again. Remember, we're only looking for the important stuff. So it says the equation below represents the cost Y, so Y is cost, of having your yard landscaped by a certain company that charges according to the number of hours X the job takes. So Y is cost, X is hours. Here's our equation. For sure going to need this. And then down here it says Mary paid $415 to have her yard landscaped. How many hours did the crew spend in her yard? So we're obviously going to use this 415 because it's a number, and remember this is math class. What we need to decide on now is what do I do with this number? So most of the time we're going to take this number and substitute it in somewhere, just like we did on this one. We took the 0 and substituted it in for profit because that's what it told us it was. So down here we have she paid $415. So when you think about this number, Y is the cost, X is the hours. So this 415 will need to be substituted in for the Y spot because it's the cost. That's what she paid. Then our job is to figure out how many hours did the crew spend in her yard. So let's build our equation. We're just going to take this 415 and substitute it in for that Y. So here's what that's going to look like. We have 415 is equal to 250 plus 55x. And now I just need to solve to isolate this variable over here. So first thing I need to do is get rid of this 250 because our goal is to get this by itself. So this is a positive 250, which means I'm going to subtract 250 to get rid of it. And you have to do it to both sides. These 250s are going to go away. And then we just bring down everything. So 415 minus 250 is 165. Already brought down my equal sign. And then I've got 55x over there on the right that I did not do anything with yet. Now I have to get rid of this 55x. So I need to divide in order to get rid of it. Okay, these 55s are going to go away, and I'm going to flip it again because x is on this side. We're going to get x is equal to 3. So there's the solution, but remember, dealing with word problems, we actually have to answer the question in a complete sentence. So it says, how many hours did the crew spend in her yard? That is what we actually found. So simple sentence would be the crew spent 3 hours working in her yard. So that's what we'll write. The crew spent 3 hours working in her yard. Very short sentence, but it answers the question directly. And that's all we need to do. So I'll give you a little bit of time to write that down. And then we're going to go to the inside of this foldable to example 3. So go ahead and flip to example 3 when you're done. Okay, so let's take a look at example number 3. I'm going to open my spiral notebook so I can actually write. All right, so here's example number 3. I'll go for my pen. All right, so we have example number 3. Says booth rental at the Dixon Fair is $50. You rent a booth and are selling bags of cotton candy. Each bag costs you 20 cents to make, and you will sell each bag for $1. Then it says how many bags of cotton candy must you sell to break even. So here's that break even thing again. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact of we are missing the equation. So on the first 2 examples, the equation was given to us, and on these 3 examples right here, the equation is not given to us. So we are actually going to have to create our own equation. So what I want you to write at the top of your paper, right up here, is the little hint when creating these equations, because a lot of them deal with money a lot of times. This is how you would build the equation. We have cost is equal to revenue. Okay, so cost is what it would cost us, or however much money would be spent. Revenue is similar to profit and how much you are going to make. Okay, so we'll build our equation with this in mind. Okay, so the other thing that's missing from this are the variables. They didn't actually specify the variables, so we actually have to come up with that. So I'm going to use the variable x because that's what is used most of the time anyways. So we have x, and we have to think about what we're talking about. Cotton candy bags. So I'm going to let that be x represents bags of cotton candy. Okay, bags of cotton candy. And now we can actually start building our equation. So let's take a look at the cost side first. We need to figure out how much it costs for us to have this booth. So the very first charge for the booth is, I'm going to underline it up here, is $50. That's our first charge. And we're going to be charged that no matter what. The other thing that we are charged for is right here. Each bag costs you 20 cents to make. So this is 20 cents per bag of cotton candy. So this is another cost. So I'm going to add that to my 50. I'm going to convert 20 cents to a decimal so that way I can use it. And then I have to have an X because this is 20 cents per bag of cotton candy. And if we check, these are the only 2 things that cost us money. So then my equal sign. And now I can talk about the revenue side. So remember, the revenue is like profit. It's what you're actually making. And it says right here, you sell each bag for $1. So here, that's what we're making. So we have 1x. So $1 for every bag of cotton candy. And now it looks just like the equations from earlier, so we just need to solve it and figure out how many bags of cotton candy we have to sell. So with this one, we have decimals. Please do not freak out about decimals. They work very similar to everything else. So we have an x on both sides this time. So we need to move the variable to one side. So last class, I told you the trick that I do, and it helps me a lot, and it keeps you away from the negatives. Take your smaller variable, so smaller number variable, to the bigger one. So 0.20 is smaller than $1. So I'm going to actually take this and move it over here. So this is plus 0.20, so I'm just going to subtract 0.20x. Just like that. Remember, you have to do it from both sides. Well, these right here are going to cancel. And I'm going to be left with 50 is equal to, and then this is just $1 minus 20 cents, which is 0.80x. So normally I would have a student that says, oh, so that means you make 80 cents per bag. That's technically true, but we have to figure out how many bags at 80 cents we have to make or sell in order to make back our $50 that we originally paid. And that's where this next step comes in. So to get rid of that 0.80, we would need to divide both sides by 0.80. So then those 0.80s are going to go away. And I'm going to flip it around because x is on this side. So I'm going to put x over here. X is equal to 50 divided by 0.80 is 62.5. So this is our solution, but remember we have to put it in context of the situation. So according to this is saying that when we sell 62.5 bags of cotton candy, then we have made our money back. The issue is this 0.5. You cannot sell 0.5 bags of cotton candy. You either are going to sell the bag of cotton candy or you're not. So since we are talking about profit, okay, you have to round up. So we're going to have to sell 63 bags of cotton candy to break even. So we must sell 63 bags of cotton candy to break even. So we must sell 63 bags of cotton candy to break even. So now I want to talk to you for a quick second. What if this number right here was 62.1 instead of 62.5? Because a lot of kids, they're like, oh, well, we will round up because it's 5 or more, let it soar, whatever the little phrase is. This right here, the 0.1, since we're talking about profit, if we were to round down to 62, because according to the rounding rule, we would round down. If we rounded down to 62, we actually did not meet our goal of breaking even because 0.1 would still have to be sold. So we cannot round down. We would have to round up to 63. So remember, if you're talking about money and making profit, we always have to round up. So we have to sell 63 bags of cotton candy. Okay? Take a look at number 4. Number 4 is also about the fair. So for this one, it says, you and your friends plan to attend the county fair this weekend. The admission to the fair is $5 and the cost per ride is 50 cents. Your parents have given you $20 for the night. Write and solve a linear equation to find out how many rides you can go on. So a lot of you do this in your head because you actually go to the fair. So keep in mind, when we set up our equation, we need cost is equal to revenue, okay? So let's talk about the cost. I'm going to underline the cost that it takes. So the first cost that we have is the $5, and that's the admission to get into the fair. The other cost that we have is 50 cents per ride, okay? And then here is our revenue. So that's what our parents gave us. That's the money that we made, okay? So now let's build our equation. $5 was our, see, I almost forgot. We need to name our variables because they didn't tell us what the variables meant. So I'm going to use the variable x again. And think about the question. So what's the question? How many rides can you go on? So we're going to let this be number of rides. Okay? Number of rides. Now that we've named our variable, we can actually build our equation. So my first cost that I had was $5. That was to get me into the fair. And the other cost that I have is this 50 cents per ride. So again, we're going to convert 50 cents. That's going to be 0.50x because this is 50 cents per ride. Okay? And that's going to, so these are my costs. How much money do I have or am I going to spend? They gave me $20. So this is how much I began with. And now we just solve it. So remember, our goal is to get that x by itself. I can't do anything with this until I get rid of this 5. So this is a positive 5, so I'm actually going to subtract 5 from both sides. These 5s are going to go away. And I'm left with 0.50x is equal to 15. And now I'm going to get rid of this 0.50 by dividing both sides by 0.50. So these are going to go away. And x is equal to 30. So again, because this is a word problem, we need to know what does this actually mean. So it means x represents the number of rides. So that means we can go on 30 rides at the fair. So we can go on 30 rides at the fair. Okay? And this 30 doesn't specify if this is like only yours or are you sharing with your friends. So that just means that with the money that you have, you can buy rides for 30 of them. Okay? All right, we have one more that we're going to do. And it's number 5. So this one looks a little longer, but it's actually the easiest one in this foldable. So let's look at why. So remember, our whole goal is to figure out what number does x have to be to make the situation work. So I'm going to read it. We need to decide what's important. So it says, suppose that Amy is saving up for a guitar that costs $200. To raise money, she decides to have a bake sale in which she charges $2 for each baked good. Her parents bought the materials and helped her bake the goods for her sale. Her goal with the bake sale is to make enough money so that she can get the guitar, which is $200. And then this says, create an equation to model her situation and use it to find out how many baked goods she has to sell to buy her guitar. So a lot of you are actually going to do this, maybe not this exact situation, but there's something that you like that you're going to be saving up for. So the first thing that we need to do is label our variables because they didn't tell us what our variables meant in there. So I'm going to use x again. And then look back at the question to help you figure out what x is going to represent. We're looking at how many baked goods. So x is going to be the number of baked goods. And then we need to remember that it's cost equals revenue, okay? So let's go back to our equation to try to figure out the numbers and what we need. The first one, it says costs $200. So this is how much we're actually going to pay. This is our cost. We're not going to do it immediately, but that's our cost. So I'm going to put 200 is equal to, the right side would be our revenue side, so that's how much we're selling these little cookies or whatever it is. And we have $2 for each one of those. So I'm going to put 2x because this is $2 per baked good. Okay, and that's our equation. Very simple. It didn't specify that her parents were making her pay back the material, so we're assuming they're giving those to her. And so there's our equation. This is a very simple one-step equation. In order to isolate that variable, we would just need to get rid of that 2 using division. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. And that gives us x is equal to 100. Now, again, x is equal to 100 is correct, but what does that actually mean in real life? So if you're confused on this part, look back at your question. It says, how many baked goods does she have to sell to buy her guitar? So we can say Amy needs to sell 100 baked goods to buy her guitar. So Amy needs to sell 100 baked goods to buy her guitar. And that's it. So these are your notes that go on page 18. And that's all I got for you. Good job today, guys.